Hello? Are you alright?
The story of last night, basically, there's a guy and a girl on a night out together, and they've got a close friendship. The girl meets a guy, and her friend obviously gets quite jealous, quite a common story. And then, while they're walking home, guy shows up again, and friend is not happy about it. Friend is me, and yeah, he's not happy about it, so things develop. It's a really difficult one not to spoil because from the off there's spoilers straight up.
We just missed the last bag.
Sorry, that was probably my fault. Can I give you a lift?
I thought you were never gonna.
Haven't you been drinking?
Just ignore it.
I was trying to help.
And it's much appreciated. So it follows a 19-year-old girl. She is very frightened from the very start. She wakes up in the woods next to a dead body. She assumes that he's fallen off the cliff because of an assault. That's how it appears because of the way he's found. And then it goes through a series of flashbacks.
Tony, get away from the edge! Get away from the edge! Get away from the edge! Dave!
What? You were fighting with him in the woods, I was there.
Action! I hadn't directed a film for 5 years. The last film I'd made went into sort of post-production nightmare and hasn't got finished yet. Yeah, I was just very aware that my portfolio was running out, was sort of wearing down, and that I hadn't sort of made an impression on the industry for a while, and I needed to if I was going to be a filmmaker, because a lot of my time had been spent developing feature film projects, and while I was doing that, I hadn't been making films. So I was really sort of desperate to make films, and I was aware of the fact that it was making me depressed that I wasn't. As it was getting close to the end of 2017, I promised to myself that I'd make a film this year, and I thought, well, I need something. What can I do? And I'd just been remastering my student film Blackout, which was a 1996 short shot on a 16mm black and white. And I was watching it thinking, how would I do that today if I was a student today? Not just technically, but in terms of the story, you know, how audiences' expectations and tastes changed in 20 years. So I flipped the premise on its head, because Blackout was about a guy who wakes up in the middle of a wood next to a dead girl, and he can't remember what happened. And so I had a girl wake up on a cliff edge in the middle of the wood next to a dead guy. Quiet on set, everyone. Still, very still. And action. Got that. Good. We shot on an iPhone because I wanted to make a film and I had no money. And also just the sheer challenge of it, really, just to prove a point that if you've got a smartphone, there's no excuse not to make films.
He's making this purely for the love of filmmaking and for the love of his craft, you know. That was something I've not really seen before. And I think that might have been born out of the fact that maybe this was more experiment than it was anything else for him, because he's remaking a film he made 20 years ago. He wants to see how technology these days can help him do that.
I wanted to be a more innovative filmmaker and a more resourceful filmmaker, because I knew if I could be at the forefront of this technology, I would stay in the game.
It's like from one extreme to the other, from 16mm film to an iPhone 6, I think, which is just this tiny little thing, you know, and you tap the screen and it goes into record, and that's it really. You know? You're not restrained by huge amounts of kit.
I think making the film on an iPhone's actually quite inspired, because the experience that we had of him getting into different places and getting specific shots could not be done with a bulky on your shoulders camera that a lot of productions use.
Rigging a small iPhone in a car was just easy peasy, you know, because it's so small, and it mounted onto the dashboard, and there was a reverse that was mounted somewhere as well, but so easy to mount, and that's where that small phone technology for filmmaking really comes into its own, you know.
I just think that it made for a completely different filmmaking experience.
Pretty good.
Did you actually get me in it?
I got your bottom landing.
The original short, Blackout, was all about me being a beta male in a predominantly alpha male city of Newcastle. It was a football city, and I didn't feel very comfortable there at all while I was at university. And so it was really sort of me coming to terms with that kind of world and exploring my own masculinity and where I lay in that spectrum. So when we flipped Blackout on its head, there was, in terms of a need to tell the story, there was no need thematically. You know, the premise was an interesting premise, but I had nothing to say internally about it. But externally, I did want to play with gender. You know, there's been a lot of stuff about gender politics lately, and misunderstandings about it, I think. So what I was trying to do was explore gender in film, and by flipping Blackout on its head and having a female lead, to see what would happen, if anything, that would change the story because they were female rather than male. And actually what I learnt was it's not about whether they're male or female. Being male or female has absolutely no relevance at all. It's just the same as being black or white or being gay or straight. They don't make character. That's just who you are, as in labels you give yourself. It's what you do, it's the actions that you do that tell people who you are. And so it's more about levels of masculinity and femininity in an individual and how they play out.
Let's do one more time. Just see your arms. You need to keep your arms bent. You basically came out of frame. And then...
Working with Derek was fascinating purely because he took on so much.
Director, DOP, writer, you know, you name it, he does it. He's a one-man band.
Those jobs are separated for a reason, and for him to take all of them on, I think, was a big ask.
I was amazed at how he actually got the whole thing done, and I could see him being stretched at points, you know, as someone would, you know, taking on so many roles.
I mean, the producer and the director are meant to argue the whole production to try and get sort of the best out of each other, and you could see him having like these internal like conflicts to try and recreate that. But to watch that while it was happening was really interesting.
Derek made working with him very, very personal.
He has such a vision of what he wanted to achieve.
He's got this amazing film brain where he just sees the film as he's making it.
He pushed me to the limit as well, which is what you need in a director.
He sort of, radiates this confidence as well with his craft, you know, that makes you feel very comfortable and reassured on set.
Action!
Get the fuck off me! Hey, Tony, get off me! Come here! Get the fuck away from me! Get the fuck off me! Tony!
A movie like this comes with quite a few challenges.
It's probably one of the most gruelling experiences I've ever had.
It was challenging, physically and emotionally.
We were in the woods, in the cold, in the middle of the night.
Look what you're making me do!
We were all pushed and tested and challenged and sleep deprived. And
I personally have never done anything that intense.
But it was great. It was great fun.
I think part of why it was so gruelling is purely because everyone was having to take on a little bit more responsibility. The camaraderie of the cast and crew together really stood out to me.
Working with the crew and the cast felt like we kind of had a connection, like working together.
Me, Ben and Natasha were coming to set together each day, so we were just sort of dissecting what happened the night before, thinking about what we wanted to happen.
You kind of need that, like a professional environment, to be able to get out those characters.
And then on set, because there's only 3 actors, you're not all on camera at the same time, and so when you weren't on camera, you were mucking in with the crew and getting to know the crew who you'd never met before. And I think it really worked. We did become this sort of tight-knit family, and I got to know the other guys like really well. And I really enjoyed the behind-the-scenes aspects of the film.
How's it all going then?
Yeah, it's all right, thank you. A bit nippy.
What scene have you just done?
So at the moment we're shooting when Natasha discovers Ben's body, and the blood is truly horrific. So I'm helping behind the scenes more at the moment.
Come forward as if you're turning him over.
There's nothing wrong in making films on an iPhone. You can make absolutely gripping, enjoyable, entertaining films. It's not about how big your camera is. It's about storytelling, and that's it. And people will be forgiving for poor image quality, But we know that already with things like Blair Witch or 28 Days Later, and people just want to be entertained. As long as you're doing that, I don't think the image quality matters. Also, just to embrace fear. I mean, on the first night, again, I said I didn't have any experienced crew on board, and there was 4 students that were kind of expecting me to be competent, and I was crapping myself. And when it started raining on the first day, I was just there was a point where I just wanted to run home to my wife and child, close the door, and just go, "That's really embarrassing. I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't even have thought of it." But the rain stopped, and we cracked on, and I got the adrenaline rush, and I got the buzz, and I just thought, "Oh, I'm so glad I did this."